Welcome to Triday's RoundTable 43, The Return of the Jewish Messiah and Sacred Economics, the Real Crime Committed Against the Roman Empire. I am Adam Finnegan, and I will be moderating today. These roundtables were inspired by the two-volume book series, The Valediction, by husband and wife co-authors Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould, who have developed a plan for world peace that can be found at valediction.net. You click on World Peace in the top banner to get up to speed about that plan. Today, we will be exploring it further with discussion about sacred economics, that is, promoting an economy that works for the people rather than for the imperialists. We will hear a few speakers, then we want everybody to participate with questions and suggestions on how to make peace the foundation for life on this planet. But before that, I'd like to introduce our hosts, publisher Chris Milligan.
Thank you, Adam, very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here for this discussion. And we do want to be respectful of everybody and all religions in this discussion. Now, I generally start these off because, these things were Paul Fitzgerald is one of the Fitzgeralds of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And he's done some deep dives into Fitzgerald history and shown how this history has affected our mutual history. And a lot of this has been about JFK's famous peace speech, which just happened in June of June 10th, I believe, 1963. Now, I'm going to read from a speech that John Kennedy made before his election. Okay, this is a speech to the Zionist American Convention of August 26, 1960. Prophecy is a Jewish tradition, and the World Zionist movement, in which all of you have played so important a role, has continued this tradition. It has turned the dreams of its leaders into acts of statesmanship. It has converted the hopes of the Jewish people into concrete facts of life. When the first Zionist conference met in 1897, Palestine was a neglected wasteland. A few scattered Jewish colonies had resettled there, but they had come to die in the Holy Land rather than to make it live again in greatness. Most of the governments of the world were indifferent. For I have always believed that there is no real conflict or contradiction between the genuine aspiration of the Arab nations and the genuine aspirations of Israel. The Arab people rose to freedom and independence in the very years which saw the rise of Israel. From the cooperation of these two awakened nationalisms could come a new golden age for the Middle East. But from their destructive vendetta can come nothing but misery and poverty and the risk of war. The Middle East needs water, not war, tractors, not tanks, bread, not bombs. There is already little enough available in the way of financial and physical resources for either side to be devoting its energies to huge defense budgets. The present state of tension serves only the worst interests of the Arab and Israeli alike. But a new spirit of comedy could well serve the highest ideals of both. For the original Zionist philosophy has always maintained that the people of Israel would use their national genius not for selfish purposes, but for the enrichment and the glory of the entire Middle East. The earliest leaders of the Zionist movement spoke of a Jewish state which would have no military power and which would be content with the victories of the Spirit. The compulsions of harsh and inescapable necessity have compelled Israel to abandon this hope. But I cannot believe that Israel has any real desire to remain indefinitely a garrison state, surrounded by fear and hate. And I cannot believe that the Arab world would not find a better basis for unity in a united attack on all their accumulated social problems an attack in which they could benefit immensely from closer cooperation with the people of Israel. When we think of the possibilities of this association, an emotion of soaring hope replaces our somber anxieties about the Middle East. Ancient rivers would give their power to new industries. The desert would yield to civilization. Diseases would be eradicated, especially the disease that strikes down helpless children. The blight of poverty would be replaced by the blessings of abundance. Peace is our primary objective in the Middle East. Peace is partly our responsibility. Seek peace and pursue it, commands the psalmist, and we must do with open minds, open hearts, and the priceless asset of our American heritage. We shall seek peace in the Middle East as elsewhere. And when history writes its verdict, let it be said that we pursued the peace with all the courage, all the strength, and all the resourcefulness of our command. In this task, I ask for your assistance, your patience, your wisdom, and your support until we can say to Jew and Arab alike, peace be within thy walls and plenteousness within thy palaces. For my brethren and companions' sake, I will wish thee prosperity. You know, the world has gone through a few things since when Mr. Kennedy said those words in September of 1963. And again, our country was saddened and left bereft from his murder. And we are still dealing with it and still looking for peace. And one of the things that this roundtable has been talking about is we can't have peace without justice. And a lot of that is economic justice. And I'm going to introduce Liz Gould here, and she's going to introduce her next guest. It's going to give us some wise words about this subject.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome to everyone who's here. We're very glad to see you. Since we started the roundtables, Paul and I have traced century-old patterns of ritual power and resistance, always guided by the themes of JFK's vision of peace, the Fitzgerald legacy, and Henry George's call for sacred economics. Today's topic, the return of the Jewish Messiah and sacred economics, the real crime committed against the Roman Empire, begs the question, what is sacred economics? Well, it's very simple to understand. It's an economy that can work for the people instead of the imperial elites. A more important point is that it's a dangerous path to promote. It was true for JFK in the 20th century, for Jesus 2,000 years ago, and for the last Fitzgerald Earl of Desmond 400 years ago. But regardless of the danger, these men and many more throughout history stood for sacred economics, a system for the people rooted in justice, dignity, fairness, and peace. And now Alana Hartzog will lead a discussion that will help us learn how to build a better future for our children through sacred economics, the foundation of JFK's vision for world peace. Alana is an economic justice expert, an administrative director, and UN NGO representative for the International Union for Land Value Taxation, and author of The Earth Belongs to Everyone. Take it away, Alana.
Thank you so much. I'm lining up the show. Okay, I'm coming to you from a train car in Titusville, Pennsylvania. It's one of 20 train cars converted into a motel. And we've been exploring the oil region where oil was discovered. Is that relevant to our theme? Well, our theme being the earth is the birthright of all people, and what happened under the empire of Rome to Christianity, and what was Jesus' teachings around economics. So let's see, economic principles in the Vedic. Now, this was thousands of years ago. I am going to go through thousands of years all over the world, the rise and fall of civilizations based on the perennial wisdom teaching that the earth is made not by humans, but by some kind of creator or creative force, and it should by right and by natural law belong equally to us all. So we'll get into a part that's dealing around the Roman Empire a little bit later. So this was a Greek born Vedic scholar, and he's tracing back 5,000 years ago to the Indus River Valley. The study deals with principles found in these ancient sources. Principle has an unchanging and eternal quality, hence the capacity of a principle to guide us now when we seem to have lost the track of how to move forward on the planet. The work of wise lawgivers in the remote antiquity of the Vedic period shows the same concern about the distribution of wealth that occupies the mind of modern economics. Wonderful Vedic temple image. Ancient Indian codes of law. The sages who instituted their laws recognized fully all the needs for bodily wholeness and food and shelter, locomotion, assembly, property and reputation, solitude and peace, physical work and spiritual development. They sound like they were human beings, just like us. The same needs, the same desires, the same challenges. A most surprising feature. Oops. Go back. I'm trying to get that banner at the bottom because that's showing the recording, the banner. It's
No,
showing all my slides. Is it? You don't
no.
want that? Okay, good. A most surprising feature of these ancient teachings is that of free access to land for all and the land value tax, which should be the source of government revenue and expenditure. Surprising because land value taxation is supposed to be a fairly modern concept. This is a concept of rent or surplus. A higher charge is to be on the more fertile land. Land tenure in the Vedic age. In ancient times, the lawgivers provided their people both with common land and individual holdings. Principles being land as a divine entity, belongs to the whole of mankind. That means no making killings in real estate, folks, you know. The land belongs to all men equally. The whole community holds the region where it lives. Land is the commons, right? Land is cultivated by individuals or families, not jointly by the community. So here is our Liberty Bell, right? An image of it. And on our Liberty Bell says, proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. But what's on the Liberty Bell? A big crack. And here's Chief Little Bear at a World's Fair checking out that crack in the Liberty Bell. What do you think he's thinking? Well, we couldn't even forge a bell. I think the third time they rang it, it broke. So we did not forge a democracy that could survive because just like we didn't have the metallurgy to make the metal to make the bell survive without the crack, we have a cracked democracy. We have a democracy that's never based on economic democracy, which should be based on the principle of democratic rights by birthright to the land and resources of the earth. That's our crack right there. And that is the Leviticus quote. So now we're into the early biblical period, the Old Testament, you could say. Early Christian land ethic was echoed in the Old Testament teachings concerning land rights. The famous phrase, land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine, God is speaking. You are but strangers, residents with me. Leviticus 25:23. Now we're in Ecclesiastics. The profit of the earth is for all. You don't make private profiteering in our planet. You share it. Woe unto them. And Isaiah speaking from the time when land was being consolidated in the hands of few. He's a prophet wailing in the wilderness, saying, woe unto them that join house to house, lay field to field, till there be no place. And then we have, and this is where I got to move this banner because I can't even read it. Somebody else read that. Restore, I pray you, while I remove my banner.
To them, even this day, their lands, their vineyards, their olive yards, and their houses.
Nehemiah, another land rights, earth rights prophet, wailing against the poverty was happening when a few were grabbing the land. Oh, now I'm stuck. I'm not moving forward. That's a problem. What do I do here? Oh, my whole PowerPoint has gotten stuck. Well, there you go. All right. So this is some details about how the promised land was to be fairly shared. Land tenure and promised land described in Leviticus. Those with the poorer land, there were different tribes within the Hebrew people when they went to the promised land. And of course, first they killed off a lot of people to capture the promised land, but we're not going to go into that. Those with poorer land were to be given more acreage. Those with more fertile land would be given less. But what about land locations regarding the marketplace? Well, how do we deal with the land locations regarded by marketplace, especially when my cursor is again stuck? Now, this is Gemara Baba Batra, and this is from the Talmudic teachings. And this is when the rabbis, the teachers are saying, well, some people are going to be located closer to the market, Jerusalem, and some are going to be further away. They're going to have to travel for a couple of days to get to the market, and that's an unfair advantage of the labor according to their location. This is a very important question, and here was their solution. Upon the more valuable holdings was to be imposed a tax or a lease fee, the measure of which was the excess of their respective values over a given standard. And the fund thus created was to be paid out in due proportions to those whose holdings were in less favorable locations. That's a mouthful, that's a lot of words, but you know what? That's exactly what the land value tax is. Those who have land of more value pay more into the common fund. Those with less value are going to pay less, and then you share that common fund. So they were going on and they were saying, as for land disadvantageously situated, the adjustment was to be made by money. That is to say, those holding land near the city, Jerusalem, should pay into the common treasury the estimated excess of value pertaining to it by reason of its superior situation, while those holding land of less value, by reason of its distance from the city, would receive from the treasury a money compensation. In this, then, we see affirmed the doctrine that natural advantages or common property may not be diverted to private gain. So early Christian land ethic was that of koinonia, meaning essentially that God was the sole owner of the earth, which was given as a gift to all for the autarkia, the self-reliant livelihood of all. Now this, as Jesus was bringing back original Judaic justice teachings, he was pointing to this understanding. So now we're going to jump from that Judaic period. We're going to jump to China for just a minute. And I took out from a previous production of this PowerPoint a number of slides pertaining to Chinese history because I didn't want to, just make it too long. So Peter Bauman's research, School of Economic Science, detailed rise and fall of Chinese dynasties due to whether or not they adhered to the perennial wisdom teachings of fairly sharing the land. Now here is a very important old philosopher. Mencius, look, we're looking back 300 BC. He was one of Confucius' most famous disciples. He advocated for a system where land rent was collected by the public, effectively replacing other taxes and tariffs. This is what Henry George rediscovered. Mencius believed that by focusing on land rent, the government could provide for the people's needs and promote a flourishing society while minimizing other forms of taxation. Mencius saw the value of land, particularly in urban areas, where's the highest value, as a natural source of public revenue. This approach was intended to ensure the well-being of the people for providing their needs and fostering a prosperous environment. Now, fast forward really far from what Mencius was saying to Sun Yat-sen You see his dates there. Chinese physician, revolutionary statesman, political philosopher who founded Republic of China and his first political party, Kuomintang. As the paramount leader of the 1911 revolution, Sun is credited with overthrowing the Qing imperial dynasty, which had become quite corrupt, and served as the first president of the provisional government of the Republic of China. He had a hard job. There was a lot of people vying for power at the time. But what did he say? He said the teachings of Henry George will be the basis of our program of reform. The land tax is the only means of supporting the government's an infinitely just and reasonable and equitably distributed tax, and on it we will found our new system. How did he know about Henry George? This is really, he didn't know about it from Mencius. He hadn't studied the Chinese dynasties rise and fall around the land problem and even land value tax in ancient China. How did he find out about it? Get this. German land reform in China was based on Henry George tax policy. German land reforms primarily refer to the land policies implemented in the Kaohsiung Bay leased territory, Jiaozhou Bay, a German colony in China from 1898 to 1914. These reforms were inspired by Henry George's single tax theory, aimed to prevent land speculation and ensure fair land distribution. Sun Yat-sen heard about this area of China and how well developed it was being, and the land reform that was a natural result of the tax policy. So here the territory fully implemented the Georgia's policy. Its sole source of government revenue was the land value tax of 6%, which it levied in its territory. The German colonial empire had previously had economic problems with its African colonies caused by land speculation. One of the main reasons for using the land value tax in Jiaozhou Bay was to eliminate such speculation, which the policy achieved. After the 1911 revolution, many wealthy Chinese and politically connected ex-officials settled in the leased territory because of the safe and orderly environment it offered. Sun Yat-sen visited Tsingtao area and stated in 1912, "I'm impressed. The city is a true model for China's future." What happened? What happened was, and I won't go into this history, after all this kind of confusion going from the Qing dynasty to trying to create a republic, eventually the communists took over, Mao Zedong came in. So, and that's another thing this slideshow is going to show. It's going to show how close the land value tax came to being major implemented, and how it didn't quite make it and why. So we're going to look at the physiocrats. They were medical doctors in France at the time before the French Revolution, when France was so huge wealth and power inequality that they were risking a revolt of the people of the peasantry, and they knew that. So the king asked his court physicians, because they knew about blood circulation, if they could study the circulation of wealth through the French economy. So these are the best known: Quesnay, Turgot, and Mirabeau. This is look at the dates, 1700s. Now, the physiocrats coined the phrase l'impôt unique, the single tax. This is before Henry George, but they came up with this. Urged the French kings to levy taxes on land instead of labor. One of the Enlightenment's wise men, Mirabeau the Elder, held that their discovery would be, if enacted, a social advance equal to the inventions of writing and money. Big deal. But here, Quesnay is known for his writings on Chinese politics and society. Because of his admiration of Confucianism, we mentioned Mencius, right? Quesnay's followers bestowed him with the title Confucius of Europe. Many tax principles put forth by him and other physiocrats were derived from land and tax policies of these dynasties of China. Isn't that interesting? So from China and Mencius, we had Quesnay in France before Henry George. And then what happened? Well, we're going to look at what happened in a minute. But the other connection to the physiocrats is this, that Adam Smith studied in France with the physiocrats. He was a young scholar. And I'm sure you all know of Adam Smith and his classic Wealth of Nations. He said both ground rents and the ordinary rent of land are species of revenue which the owner, in many cases, enjoys without any care or attention of his own. ground rents seem in this respect a more proper subject of peculiar, meaning particular, but they said peculiar at the time, taxation. Nothing can be more reasonable than that a fund which owes its existence to the good government of the state should be taxed peculiarly. Again, the perennial wisdom teaching of the land rights and the land value tax, land rent policy. The last king, okay, what happened was the barons, the land barons didn't want to implement this impôt unique single tax that the physiocrats recommended. They weren't about to do that. And so you had Louis the 16th, last king of France. Things got so violent because they weren't addressing the land problem. What was that was it Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake? People were starving. I mean, there was no caring about the poverty of the people. So he was executed by guillotine, 1793, following his conviction for treason during the French Revolution. His reign ended with the abolition of the monarchy by the National Convention, 1792. Well, then he was guillotined. So see, if this wealth inequality doesn't get addressed, if it doesn't get solved, societies collapse into horrific, horrific violence. We're on the cusp of that. We got to get enough intellectual, mental, spiritual power out there in the world as to how to solve this so we're not completely stuck again in another bloody revolution, which we had with the Civil War not long ago. Mentioning of which, the Reconstruction after the Civil War and the land question. Reconstruction made possible the consolidation of Black families, so often divided by sale during slavery, and the establishment of the independent Black church as the core institution of the emerging Black community. But the failure to respond to the former slaves' desire for land left most with no choice but to work for their former owners. They then became housekeepers, paid housekeepers, they could barely survive. Or they became shareholders on land where they had to give 50% of their shareholdings to the landowner. So 40 acres and a mule, Thaddeus Stevens, congressman, was a strong pro-abolition voice in Congress. You happen to be from the area in Pennsylvania where I live. So he championed 13, 14, 15 amendments. He was the champion of the land reform for the South, which we'll read about here. Special Field Order number 15, a post-war promise proclaimed by Union General William Tecumseh Sherman, 1865, to allot family units, and this was including free people and poor people, or whites and freed slaves, a plot of land no larger than 40 acres. Sherman later ordered the army to lend mules for the agrarian reform effort, and the field orders followed a series of conversations between Secretary of War Stanton and radical Republican abolitionist Charles Sumner and Thaddeus Stevens, following disruptions to the institution of slavery provoked by the American Civil War. I mean, the question was, what do you do with all these lands that the slave owners owned? So they wanted to have a land reform and give it to the freed people and the poor people. So the truth behind 40 acres and a mule, what many accounts leave out is the idea for massive land distribution, was the result of a discussion that Sherman and Secretary of War Stanton held 4 days before Sherman issued this order, with 20 leaders of the Black community in Savannah, Georgia, where Sherman was headquartered following his famous March to the Sea. The meeting was unprecedented in American history. Why? Stanton had suggested to Sherman that they gather the leaders of the local Negro community and ask them something no one else had apparently thought to ask. What do you want for your own people following the war? And what they wanted astonishes us even today. The narrative says, what did they tell Sherman and Stanton that the Negro most wanted? Land. The way we can best take care of ourselves, Reverend Fraser began his answer to the crucial third question, is to have land and turn it and till it by our own labor, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. And when asked where the freed slaves would rather live, scattered among whites or in colonies by themselves without missing a beat, Brother Fraser said, I would prefer to live by ourselves, where there's a prejudice against us in the South that will take years to get over. So 4 days later, they issued this big land reform order, 40 acres and a mule, and they started distributing land. By June, 40,000 freedmen had been settled on 400,000 acres of the so-called Sherman land. And Sherman ordered the army could lend those new settlers the mules, 40 acres and a mule. And what happened, though, to this astonishingly visionary program, which would have fundamentally altered the course of American race relations? Well, Lincoln was assassinated, and Andrew Johnson, his successor, was a sympathizer with the South, and he overturned the order in 1865. And as Barton Myers sadly concludes, returned the land along South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida coast to the planters who had originally owned it, to the very people who had declared war on the United States of America. Again, about to solve the land problem? No, it comes crashing down, crashing down. Theodore Roszak said, land reform's the undiscovered revolution in American politics. He said that in his book, Person Planets, decades ago. So now we're to our beloved and esteemed Henry George and his masterwork, Progress and Poverty. It's not enough that men should vote. It's not enough that they be theoretically equal before the law. All men are created equal. They must have liberty to avail themselves of the opportunities and means of life. They must stand on equal terms with reference to the bounty of nature. Henry George. He said we must make land common property. He meant not communitarian necessary property. He meant that the ethic is that the earth is a commons to be fairly shared, the original Judeo early Christian ethic. And Henry George, independently, through his own experience and reasoning, came to understand the dimensions and dynamics of the land problem and came up with the same land value tax solution. You see why this is a golden thread of perennial wisdom teachings, both the ethics, morality, and the specific policy approach, because it keeps being rediscovered throughout eons of time, because it is a natural law that just makes sense if you're going to have a world that truly works for everyone. So just reflect on that image for a minute. The earth in the center of that very kind of holy geometric form. Now, I'm administrator for the International Union for Land Value Taxation, the IU.org. And this declaration was put together in the 1920s, International Declaration on Individual and Common Rights to Earth States. The exercise of both common and individual rights in land is essential to a society based on justice, but the rights of individuals in natural resources are limited by the just rights of the community. Denying the existence of common rights in land creates a condition of society wherein the exercise of individual rights becomes impossible for the great mass of the people. Think about our society today. What kind of individual rights do we really have? Do we really control our political system? Now, we're in a very interesting chapter here in this PowerPoint. The great Russian novelist, I hope you've all heard of Leo Tolstoy, Letter to London Times, 1905, wrote, "People do not argue with the teachings of Henry George, they simply do not know it." Tolstoy was a wealthy landowner. He was a famous intellectual, and he went through a huge existential identity crisis. He went through a spiritual crisis. By then, the Christian, as Liz mentioned, the corruption that happened in Rome of Christianity, which is the thread of the original Judaic teachings on land. He saw the very rich people going to churches and praying, and he said, "What hypocrites," because he saw the masses of people hungry, starving, and living in degraded circumstances. And his wealth, his power, his recognition as a novelist just didn't make it for him. And he was questioning the value, meaning, and purpose of his life. And then he came across Henry George economics, turned him around. He had a huge portrait of Henry George behind his desk. He never met Henry George, but here he met Henry George's son, Henry George Jr., who actually traveled to Tolstoy's house and met with Leo Tolstoy. in Leo Tolstoy's last novel. It's a really interesting short novel called Resurrection. Okay. In Resurrection, and Tolstoy himself had given away a lot of his land to the peasants, his peasant people, and so the main character in Resurrection is roughly biographical about Leo Tolstoy, and in the novel Resurrection, he has a land baron talking to the peasants who he's giving the land to, and he's saying, "You should read this guy Henry George, all right? Oh my goodness. And how are you going to share the land that I'm giving you? And how are you going to keep it as a fairly shared resource?" He's asking the peasants this in the novel. So I'm going to read all this. Resurrection is a powerful novel that combines a compelling narrative of personal redemption with a scathing critique of social injustice, all deeply influenced by Tolstoy's evolving spiritual and philosophical views, including his engagement with Henry George's ideas. In essence, chapter 9, the main character, Neludoff, was encouraged by this. And he began to explain Henry George's single tax system. He says, "The earth is no man's, it is God's. The land is common to all have the same right to it. But there's good land and bad land, and everyone would like to take the good land. How is one to do in order to get it justly divided? And in this way, he who uses the good land must pay the value of it to those who have got none." And Nelyudov went on, answering his own question, how are you going to share? Some land's better, some land's worse. And I'm sorry, some typos in here. As it would be difficult to say who should pay to whom, and as money is needed for communal use, it should be arranged that he who uses the good land should pay the value of that land to the commune for its needs. Then everyone would share equally. If you want to use land, you pay for it, more for the good land and less for the bad land. If you do not wish to use land, don't pay anything. And those who use the land will pay the taxes and the communal expenses for you. So I think it's pretty remarkable that he's actually talking to his peasants in the novel and refers to Henry George several times in the novel, in fact. So Leo Tolstoy, one of the first conditions of happiness is that the link between man and nature shall not be broken. So earth rights means both taking care of the earth, but sharing the earth. So what happens when you don't solve the land problem in time? We saw what happened in the French Revolution. Tsar Nicholas II, last emperor of Russia, abdicated, yet his entire family were executed by Bolshevik revolutionaries in Yekaterinburg on July 17, 1918. This event marked the end of the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty. Now, Tolstoy wrote, and he spoke about writing, and they're available to read, many, many, many letters to the Tsar and other officials in the government, saying you've got to implement this land value tax. Pay attention to this American political economist, Henry George. You've got to implement the land value tax. They didn't do it. They didn't listen to him. So again, you got another bloody revolution. And look at that beautiful family that got killed. I mean, thou shalt not kill. But when it gets so bad, people die. Now, the interesting thing is Leninism took over. Marx actually understood the land problem. Marxists today do not talk about the land problem. But in the Communist Manifesto, 1848, before Henry George, Marx and Engels listed 10 policies in order to achieve socialism. Number 1 was abolition of property and land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Now, just like any technology, it's not very good in the beginning, like the Liberty Bell cracked. So does our ideology not quite get how to really do, it's not fit for purpose. So we know now you don't need to abolish private property and land. In fact, it's good to have private land titles because that looks at who has what use rights to what patch of land. And it's good to have private use rights. So no need to at all nationalize or abolish property and land. But this application of the rents of land to public purposes is what we can do now and has been done, in partial degrees at least, in many places worldwide. My state of Pennsylvania, 18 towns and cities shifting their property tax off of the houses and buildings and onto the land value. And places like where there were 1 million acres in California owned by one person used a land value tax system to break that up into 7,000 small farms. So we know that we have the intellectual and the knowledge base as to how to implement this policy. Now, talk about the right and the left being divided and how the elites like to divide and rule and conquer. With this approach, we totally transcend red and blue economics. This is total purple. So look at these two. Move beyond compromise, reconcile land value tax. So here you have the Marx and the Friedman. What could be more far left and more right than these two? But you have, say, Marx said rent is extracted by the landowner despite the palpable and complete passiveness of the owner, whose sole activity consists in exploiting the progress of social developments towards which he contributes nothing and for which he risks nothing, unlike the industrial capitalist. He saw the land problem. Current Marxism does not. Milton Friedman, land should be taxed as much as possible and improvements as little as possible. Called it the least bad tax. They're both saying the same thing. So here is a photo I found the other day. On the far left is Leo Tolstoy and his buddies, and they're playing chess. Now, for how many thousands and thousands of years we've been playing these games? It's adversarial, it's win-lose, but look at the game board. It's squares. You're squared off. One side of the territory, the other's on the other side, and the goal is to grab the territory from the other people. Our brain cells of the human race have been playing these games for so long, we haven't played the game of how you share the territory. We haven't looked at the game board. And those games we're playing now that lead to war and horrific social problems, we got to look back at the game board, which is the human right, the human relationship to the earth itself. So in relation to games, the origin of Monopoly was Lizzie McGee, who was a Quaker, and a Georgist, Henry George person, and she created the landlord's game. First way you played the game, it was just like a folk game, a board game, set up on like properties in Atlantic City and so on. The first way you played it was the way our economy is structured, with a few grabbing most of the best land and everybody else is ultimately ending up in jail or impoverished, and one person has all the pieces at the end of the Monopoly game. That's the way it is. The top 1% has more wealth now than the bottom 50%. Or no, I think it's 90% in the United States. So this board game got co-opted by this guy who stole property rights and privatized the property rights to this game, and that became now the Monopoly game, all right? And the Monopoly game, see, the second way you played it under the landlord's game was Georgists. Whenever you landed on a space, you paid into the common fund, and pretty soon the common fund is building up, and the game really just continues harmoniously forever, and there's no win-lose. But the Monopoly game as we know it, of course, one person gets all, and it does not teach Georgist economics. The original Monopoly game taught Georgist economics. Almost at the end here, the equal right of all men and women to the use of land is as clear as their equal right to breathe the air. It's a right proclaimed by the fact of their existence, for we cannot suppose that some men and women have a right to be in this world and others do not. Henry George. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, the Lord's Prayer. I didn't go into it, but, you know, Jesus was really teaching this kind of economics. And we know what happened to Yeshua. It happens to so many that get assassinated when they start teaching the truth. But we can shift this. Now here I've got some surprise, wonderful ending slides for you all. It's going to bring us back to where we all together right now. John Francis Fitzgerald, Honey Fitz, 1863 to 1950, was a Democratic politician from Boston. Fitzgerald served as mayor of Boston and a member of the United States House of Representatives. He was the father of Rose Fitzgerald. He was the maternal grandfather of her sons, President John F. Kennedy and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, Fitzgerald, and Senator Ted Kennedy. In his old age, Fitzgerald helped his namesake grandson, John F. Kennedy, win his first election to Congress. What? Mayor Fitzgerald in the unearned increment. We recommend this is brought to our attention by Ed Dodson. And he found his old newsletter, The Public. And that's from this. We commend to the thoughtful attention of progressive citizens everywhere the efforts of Mayor Fitzgerald of Boston to recover for the public treasury some of that unearned income, all of which is clearly sees and definitely declares belongs to the community and not to the persons whose land it happens to swarm. His appeal to Governor Foss to try to secure the appointment of a tax investigating commission, not to make some inconsequential report or other, but to formulate an under increment tax measure. So probably as much as he could hope for, if indeed he can hope for that much. All right, so Honey Fitz, discussing the point of new sources of revenue for the municipality, Mayor Fitzgerald, in his address to City Council, brought forward the matter. It seems certain to become a subject of serious comment among observant and thinking people. The mayor may doubtless be considered as the spokesman of a large class of people just beginning to feel that there must be some good in the Henry George system of taxation. So John Fitzgerald, Francis Fitzgerald, was a Georgist. How about that? Way back then. Well, who do you think Honey Fitz is related to? That's him with his extended family, children and all. Fitzgerald's connecting through time and space on a special desk. You like this, Paul? Do you know that Liz sent me the slide, the picture? Mike Fitzgerald met Honey Fitzgerald when he was mayor of Boston, when Honey was. It was when Mike represented the carmen's union during a strike affecting Boston. That conversation eventually led to a discussion about their common Desmond Fitzgerald roots in Ireland. So along with all the books that Paul and Liz have put out there and Trine Day has published, you see 5 images on the desk from left to right. They are Paul's great-great-grandfather William, great-grandfather William, grandfather Mike, the one who met Honey Fitz, Paul's father William, and Paul himself. Mike's desk is now, it rather serendipitously appeared in their home, brought to them by another relative just a year or two ago. The desk is now in the home of Paul Fitzgerald and Liz Gold. So I want you all to think for a moment, because this is the last slide, but I want you to just feel we're here together now in this dialogue, in this conversation, in this roundtable. Why? Why are we here together now, listening and learning and hearing around the roundtable about this magnificent story and all these incredible connections? What is it that we as individuals alive now, what are we called to do about it? I once met an elder, Mildred Loomis, and I was giving a little talk on Henry George. I just heard about Henry George. I was 25 years old. She was like 50. She raises her hand. She says, we all know this, but what are we going to do about it? That's the question for each of us today. What are you going to do about this information? So you can take action by joining our Earth Rights movement. Form the best game on Earth. You can join Common Ground USA. There's a website. You can become a member, and you can join a regional group, and you can help implement this policy with projects, working with other people. You can go to the International Union for Land Value Tax. We have an amazing group from all continents of the world working on our executive. We have land value tax implementation projects, small grants available. Go to theiu.org. And for free, just sign up for the Substack newsletter. Those are 2 things you can do. Join, link in, move this movement ahead. That's all I have for you today. And thank you for listening. I'll end this.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Here we are.
Paul and Liz, what do you guys have to think about what you just said?
Wow, it's a remarkable tale. And the thing is that it just connects with the origin of the value of the land versus what's been done to that valuation system over the years to benefit a very small group of people. The fact is that we all, it's like the air we breathe. We need the land, and we need that to be our main supporting feature, and that's not happening today.
Well, I find it to be quite fascinating that you can go back now, literally 2,000 years ago. There are a number of books talking about what was going on in the era of Jesus that are explaining in very, very stark terms the level of oppression that the people were living under during the time of Jesus, and what the purpose was, as I said, about the importance of understanding. And this is what we're really trying to do, make sure that the term Messiah has been completely corrupted, that it does not mean a God-like thing. This is a human being who is actually who was trying to free the Jewish people from the oppression of the Roman Empire. And this was going on, but that was in Jesus's time. Okay, and then you come up to the Norman invasion of Ireland, 1169, and what happened to the Fitzgeralds when they landed in Ireland, and they discovered a different way of relating to the land, because the Celtic Christianity turned out to be very different than the Roman Christianity that actually became what people today think of as the basically Christianity, which really excluded the real role of the Jewish Messiah. So these are all parts of what we're recognizing have been very systematically confused and suppressed, and it happens in so many ways. So this is why we were so excited to recognize that in connecting to Henry George and what he represented was actually really completely in line with the purpose of the Messiah. That's what we're talking about. People who actually have always recognized the need to represent the people and to empower the people. And I think that would be my final point to make. When you're dealing with a true Messiah, you're dealing with someone who empowers the people. They're not, looking for acolytes. They're not looking for people to worship them. What they're doing is empowering the people. So even when that leader is no longer there, the people can continue to defend themselves.
Well, the thing that I really enjoyed about Alana's thing was the breadth and the depth of it, and showing, that this understanding that the planet, the world belongs to all of the people that are here, has been around in time and around the world and in other cultures. And the other thing is that when we're able to pull it off, okay, it makes the world a better place, and it makes life better for the common people. I mean, Alana, can you tell people about Jubilee and what Jubilee is?
Jubilee came from that biblical in Leviticus, is where the Jubilee passages are. And this is again how to share the promised land. After the land was fairly distributed among the various tribes, the promised land, they want to also make sure that the money problem wasn't happening. There wasn't debt and usury. So every 7 years was the silver jubilee, when all debts were to be canceled. Okay. And then the golden jubilee was 7 times 7 plus 1. So every 50 years, a golden jubilee. That meant, of course, a debt cancellation. It meant that if you had wandered off from your family domain territory into the city and become impoverished, or whatever happened to you, you had the right of return back to your original land. So there was always going to be a safe place. We all need safe space and place. There was always a right to return to a fairly allocated land base at 50 years. So nobody could consolidate and land and claim it
Right.
beyond reclaim. And also prisoners were to be freed.
Yeah.
And also there was a resting of the land. Can you imagine a whole year to celebrate and to pray and meditate and just be present and enjoy the amazing existence itself? Uh, our society, the way it is now, we can't even imagine hardly people taking 3 months off of work. Yeah, even more than a month. It's just crazy. But they were able to save up enough food and everything. They didn't plow the fields. They let the land rest. The people rested and the land rested on that golden jubilee year. And it was a year of sacred celebration.
When was the last Jubilee, do you think?
This is very debated, Chris. They're not sure historically if the jubilees went on. Some will say, well, it never happened, and some will say it went on for hundreds of years, and some will say where there were traces of it after longer than that, 1,000 years. It really varies. Nobody knows for sure. But do we still have some sense of personal debt cancellation every 7 years in our culture? Right? Personal debt cancellation. That actually comes from a jubilee. Why is it 7 years? Debt cancellation. So there's little traces of it. And again, it's a perennial wisdom teaching. It traces through, but in terms of how it was really, what happened, we know from the Old Testament, those first five, the Torah chapter, the Torah books, is that as they lost again the principles and policies of Jubilee, it became more and more corrupt. The priests were supposed to be teachers and guides, and they didn't have land allocated. They were to live off of a 10% tithe from those who had allocated land. Well, the priests became corrupt. They kept asking for more and more tithe, more and more money. They started hoarding wealth. So the society, like we showed in all these instances, went downhill, starting to crack apart. People started demanding a king. There's no kings movement. Well, how are you going to have a society without a king? You're going to have a fair society. You don't have to have concentrated power in a king or a president. So the people started clamoring for a king. So they said, all right, we'll make have a king. So you had Solomon and David and this whole book of kings, a lineage of kings. And then you had this terrible wealth concentration. And then you had Yeshua as a teacher coming in who was railing against not just the Roman exploitation of the people, but the elites of the society exploiting their own people. The Sanhedrin, the council, the Judaic Hebrew council was quite corrupt. Except now, this is interesting. I got to tell you this little piece. Joseph of Arimathea was probably Jesus' Mother Mary, brother, and he was a wealthy merchant, and he had merchant ships up to the Irish area, the British Isles area, because that was where you could get tin. So he would trade goods from the Middle East up to get the tin. So I think this is pretty established that early Christians with Jesus, some of them went with Joseph of Arimathea up on his trading missions to Ireland. So you had the Celtic Christianity, the original purity of Christianity, which then got corrupted under the Roman Empire. So you had then the Roman imperial Christianity coming in through Europe and up through Britannia and Ireland, which then enclosed and privatized the common lands. So it's another very interested perennial wisdom teaching thread connecting the actual family of Yeshua with Celtic Christianity, with Ireland, all these sacred places in Ireland, and the battle between the corrupted Christianity of Rome and the original, and what your own family history has taught you from Desmond forward.
Well, that's very important to realize. This is that the Ireland was never invaded by Rome. They couldn't get there, and so that imperial thing is what's missing. And you counter that, of course, with the original apostles and the original disciples of as you said, Jesus, and they're coming directly into Ireland with the original message and the original meaning of
The
it,
Jewish message.
the Jewish message.
Yeah.
So there's a whole
Exactly.
different incorporation of the ideas and the value system into Ireland than there is. And it doesn't really change until 1170 when the Fitzgeralds arrive as Normans and they see what's going on in Ireland. And by the time 400 years later, they're completely gone over to the Irish way of doing things, which is a completely shared idea, fosterage of children, the whole idea of
The Brian Law.
the Brian laws. They're appointing the Brian laws are the judges living with the people and knowing the exact nature of the law in which these people are living and what is needed. So it's completely different from the Roman imperial law that's been imposed on everybody else. So
By the way, I would like to open up the conversation if anybody has any
I was
questions.
just about to say, yes,
Okay.
we will have participation from everyone now, and of course Joyce had her hand up. So, and then after that, we will call on to Don Light, and so Joyce.
Yes, thanks. It was a lovely presentation. But right now, in reality, there is an enormous land grab, resource grab happening right in the home of the people who claim that of the book. And that's in Israel, Palestine. It's been going on horribly for almost 2 years, longer for 50, 60, 70 years. I'd just like to bring it back a little bit to JFK's speech, which the whole peace part, fabulous, incredible. I think it was predicated on, though, that land was arid and desert and no one was living there. I think that's a misconception from what I've read. Supposedly Jews and Arabs were living comfortably together until the Balfour Declaration, and that also has claimed that there's no resources there. Well, there was the land, and also there's oil and gas, tons of it, huge riches of it that happen to be off the coast of Gaza, and that is being used. It's one of the reasons for what's going on. So applying all of this, what do we do to stop the defiling of the book, the land, the religion, etc., in the countries that are involved? I mean, we live in a lawless world right now. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is these are wonderful principles, but when you live in a lawless world, what do you do about it? And I specifically think we should talk about Israel-Palestine right now, because the rest is all commentary, to quote.
Well, there's so much that only so much that we can do directly. Okay, and the thing is, we need to understand the perfidy that has happened before we can go forward. And one of the ways that we gather understandings is gathering around a table and talking to each other. And yes, I understand your points. And yes, we live in a very complicated world. And can these simple solutions work? Well, yes, they can. Okay, but it takes it takes us understanding where we're at and where we're trying to go. It's my thought.
This is such an important topic, Joyce. Absolutely, of course. It's agonizing to see what's happening. I think I'm going to suggest a next or soon roundtable really focus on the Palestine issue situation through a land lens. But for the time being, I did write a Substack. It's on, just go to my name as Substack. I write under Eroded Airways. And I did one on Palestine, Israel, cutting the Gordian knot. And it's a pretty thorough proposal for a geo-confederation of sharing the land and the resource rents and the water, everything, and how you fairly share the holy sites and so on. And it's based on we all belong here, not the otherizing of it's my land, no, it's no your land, my roots are here. It's all of us. It's again, it belongs to all of us. How do we fairly share? I see what's happening there as a microcosm of what's happening on the planet. And I really do. It's just an acute, like an acupressure point. Sure, it's the most painful point, but this same pain around the land problem is right under our noses where we live. The homelessness where we live is just a less acute form, because if you're homeless, you're landless, you die if you don't get charity, if you don't get food given to you. And the lawlessness that's a result of not having a fairness in the land for all people. We see it acutely in the murders that happen, in the assassinations, in the wars, and the killings, and the genocides. So a small group can change the world. If we were to get clear both about a big picture policy solution for Palestine, Israel, and that whole area, and also what we can do, because it's like a hologram. So we are where each of us lives now, with wealth inequality and homelessness and the housing affordability problem. We're simply a reflection of the acute stage of what we're seeing with Palestine, Israel. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if we start seeing we're working together, these are the principles, these are the policies, here's what I'm doing in my community, here's how it relates to these horrible wars and genocides.
Or you start where the horror is happening now and start applying what you just said, land belongs to all there. And I like, because there will never be peace in the world until there is peace in the Middle East. And it's going to keep spreading if we don't stop it. And I would offer on a spiritual level that we look at the Torah, the 5 books, the Old Testament, whatever, as a metaphysical guide to the soul and to healing, rather than an historical or a literal reading of it. And if you followed what Netanyahu's been, that they use quotes from the Bible to justify the taking of the land now. So I combined with what you're saying, Anita, of it belongs to all of us, and looking at I can't speak to other holy books, but at least the first 5 books, the Torah, as a metaphysical guide. I think that will help take us out of this belonging stuff.
There's wisdom in those books too, beyond metaphysics. Okay, wisdom about how to live in this world. Quanta has her hand up.
Yes. Quanta.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think as most of you said, that this is the most complicated situation that I can imagine, because there are many religions there, and the Palestinian population was there before the Jewish population from Europe was brought, and they really have also European culture. And the way I look at it is that the European culture in the past 2-3 centuries went almost in every continent and the islands, whether in the Caribbean or the Pacific, and taken over land from the people because they consider them to be less than themselves. So, I mean, what I see in right now between the Palestinians and the Israeli Jews is that they do consider the Palestinians less than a human being. They said that they're animals and this and that. So, and to add more to the complication, I'm a Baha'i. I went to Israel 6 times, and in Haifa there's the Baha'i uh, world headquarters, you can say. But we also have holy places there where the prophets of the Baha'i faith are buried, and Mount Carmel. It's a beautiful place. So there are Persian Baha'is, and both come from Muslim and Jewish background. And then there are people, throughout the world from different religions that go there. And I'm right now having a conflicting conversations with people, even within the faith, because some of them are saying, well, Baha'u'llah is the Messiah, and he is there, and the Iranian, where he came from, are persecuting the Baha'is in Iran, whereas in Israel they're not. So it's just a wholly different and totally complicated situation. While I feel, most of the Baha'is all around the world consider Israel not as the state of Israel, but places there, they're holy places that they visit. But at the same time, they are conflicted with the violence that's going against the Palestinians. So it's a very, very, I don't know. When I saw this thing, it says Jewish Messiah, I didn't understand what this meeting was all about. So it kind of attracted me, the title. And so I don't know what you guys really talking about as far as the Jewish Messiah is concerned. Are you talking about that the Jews are still waiting for the Messiah, or was Jesus the Messiah? I'm kind of confused.
Yeah, Quanta, I can give you a very quick definition that we're working with, which is that Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, was basically in one reference book referred to him as a modern Che Guevara. Okay, you're dealing with people who are basically, first, they are human beings, not gods. They are representing the people against the imperialism of their day. And that is what we were trying to bring forward, because we recognized that was really the role that the Fitzgeralds played eventually in Ireland, coming in as invaders and then turning into defenders of the people, willing to basically die for them. So that's the relationship. That's what we tied it to the original Jewish Christians who basically were carrying those messages, the original messages that really got changed when it became imperial Roman Catholicism. The Jesus Christ of the Roman Church is different from the Jewish Messiah.
The first Catholic Church after the conversion from the pagans was called the Roman Imperial Church. It was the objective was to conquer the globe with their faith. And so all kinds of things were changed, altered, whatever, in order to serve that purpose. So that was the purpose of the Roman Church to begin with. And the Roman Church wound up doing things that the Greeks had originally intended to do. They spread it to Rome through the pagan Roman Empire, and then the pagan Roman Empire spread that ideal into the Catholic Church. So we're living downstream of all of these things. And my answer to Joyce, I would say that we have a serious problem with leadership. I think that's really, what can people do? We got involved. We were interested in the issues regarding what was going on in Vietnam. We were all impacted by it. We all had that draft issue. We were all, subject to being drafted into the army and sent off to where at 18 or 19 years old. And you had to go and report to them you had to give them your grade point average when you got into school if you had a deferment. So you had that looking over your shoulder the whole time. So we were very aware of the fact that our leadership had taken us into something that was just not good for anybody. So
But this is 2025.
but here we are once again,
And
we are faced with a leadership issue that is just really dire.
Well, that was one of my big points, though, about real leaders don't lead, they actually empower you. And I think that's really what we've been living in is leaders who basically empower themselves.
And I think you can go back to the JFK assassination and look at that as the moment in which we really felt as a people that we'd lost something profound and didn't completely understand or appreciate how deeply it went. And we're getting that now.
Yeah.
I want to insert a pertinent point before I see Carol's hand up.
I think that Joyce, did you want to?
No, go ahead. Say something.
Okay, the corruption, the Christian,
You're on
Judeo-Christian.
She's not getting
No, Alana,
But
no.
I'm
You
not
speak.
muted.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Charles Avila, who I mentioned earlier, he's Philippine. He wrote Ownership, Early Christian Teachings. He did all the research on how Christianity got corrupted. That's his famous book now. I mentioned that the military leaders are coming to him because the president and vice president are one leaning towards the United States or China empires, and the military is saying we don't want to die for imperialist wars anymore. This is an example of a leader that is a truly beloved of the people leader, Charles Avila, and the military coming to him. We could have Charles on with us sometime if we chose and wanted to do so. But what he found out was the Judeo-Christian teaching, the early Christian, the Judaic teaching of ownership is that the earth is God's gift, the koinonia, for the self-reliant livelihood of all, the autarkia. The question the Roman Empire had in converting to Christianity was, how do we get these pacifist Christians to fight in our Roman wars? And along came Augustine, and he developed the just war theory, which you still hear about today. And you hear about P2P, R2P, responsibility to protect, as part of our benign foreign policy, which is a veneer for warmongering. So they told the Christians that a just war means you're fighting for a higher purpose, and therefore you should fight. And that is how the pacifist Christians got converted into the warmongers that they are today. And it is under the Roman imperial law of dominium, which is really our U.S. foreign policy now of full spectrum dominance. Dominium legalized land acquired by conquest and plunder. So the original economic teachings were corrupted in 325. You can look at the councils of Nicaea and see time when it was done, when women were leaders, but no longer. It was just the male priesthood that was going to align with the Roman Empire. Oh, it's a very serious issue. Why are all these Christians not out in the streets saying no more war? We're not paying for war. It's because they're corrupted.
Amen.
Okay,
Carol.
so what I was just going to say, is Chris opened reading or quoting from JFK's speech to the Zionists.
Yes.
Right. So one thing is to keep bringing it back to his call. I mean, it's not like there's nothing we can do. All of your roundtables bring it back to that and keep emphasizing that. Here's the speech that he gave to the Zionists, calling for peace and allying in. Here's what we found are the ways to do it. The land belongs to all. And I think, isn't there another continuation, Liz, of the Jewish Messiah of Kennedy?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
Okay.
I think what we're trying to do is really help people understand that the term Messiah, as it was applied in the time of the Jews 2,000 years ago, and it wasn't just Jesus, there were many Messiahs. and they were all killed, they all ended up, dead. So the idea that we're dealing with those people who basically, no matter what, are always defending the rights of the people against abuse, against oppression. And we're still in that relationship today. But I think what we're now discovering is that the perception of being in a safe place like the United States, the imperialism is really creeping through very visibly now. What we witnessed in the Vietnam era has now, spread at a far more dangerous level because of the direct confrontation to free speech. And it doesn't matter which side of the table you're on, anybody's speech that is interrupted because you're expressing an idea that goes against the policy of whatever administration is such a direct threat that we have to rethink what our real problem is. In fact, I'd like to say that I think we've been shown that our Constitution needs a very serious reinforcement of thinking to really, make it, you might say, bulletproof, so this can never happen again. In fact, this is that the language and the words used created wiggle room for things to change, like giving the rights of a human being to a corporation. What was the year, Chris? 1884?
No, 1896, I believe.
No, in the 19th century.
Yeah, 1886.
Oh, I thought you said 19. Yeah, right. Okay. Where did that come from? Well, that's a perversion. That was a very visible, but it didn't stop and it's continued.
But it's very deep. I mean, the fact is that I had no idea that this concept of imperialism was referred to as sacred imperialism by the people who were converting Judaism into Christianity. And they considered that the wars that were fought, the holy wars that were fought between various Christian factions, the Guelphs and Ghibelline War, was a struggle between the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor over who was more qualified to deliver divine
hierarchy.
the divine hierarchy and divine imperialism. I mean, it was all about imperialism. So, and this goes back, 1,500, 2,000 years to these arguments that were a core to the world we're living in right now. And that's this is a sacred ideal that's being fulfilled. And that's part of what's going on with Israel. That's a very big part of what's happening with Israel right now. And so that has really got to be incorporated into what the heck do you think you're doing here? I mean, our democracy is being shredded by this process and by the electoral process. Our representatives have been all compromised in terms of what they're supposed to be doing. Our republic has been sacrificed in order to get to this point. What the heck is it for? Why are we doing it? Yeah. Because there are the issues. If you actually examine the issues, it doesn't wash. It's not clean. It's not whatever the struggle is. People really don't understand what they're being told. Well, whatever it means to you is what it means to us. Okay, that doesn't really work. The fact is that we really need to get to the core issue, and that's what we've been trying to do here with our roundtables, is get to what the issue really is. As I said, I had no idea that this thing was called sacred imperialism. Where the heck did that come from? And then I look it up. It has its own Wikipedia page, Chris. It's called the Imperial Roman Church. That was the original Catholic Church, was the Imperial Roman Church. It's like, holy cow, yeah. I had no idea. I went to 8 years to Catholic school. They never told me that. Yeah. So
what about the Inquisition?
I'd like to say a couple of words, if I may.
Well, first,
let's have
we got to get Carol was supposed to.
Okay, that's Carol.
Carol was kind of trying to go.
I appreciate so much everything that Alana said and what you've been presenting. I've been plunging very deeply into the whole problem with the money, which is like the other side of the coin of the land issue, and also just being very pushy about truth and how powerful it is. And I put on an annual film festival, and I've been probably the strongest film we have for 9/11 truth has been made by the firefighters, who really know their stuff and can just show how the impossibility of the official narrative. And I was going to put one in our film festival this year, and I realized at the very end that there was a sequel to it. And the film itself is called Calling Out Bravo 7, which is excellent, by firefighters for 9/11 truth. But there's a sequel to it, and it's called Beyond Bravo 7. And it looks at the much larger picture, including the whole economic picture. And if you look at empires, at first they only covered part of the planet. But nowadays we're looking at the global empire. And I'm sure you've all seen or heard the phrase, all wars are bankers' wars. And that usually the machinations behind the wars that get people to fight one another, kill one another, the people who get rich are the ones who have the banks and sell the armaments, especially in modern times as things are more expensive and you get this greater concentration of wealth. And a lot of people know how bad the Federal Reserve is, so they know how bad the IMF and the World Bank are. They don't realize that the BIS is actually above those banks, and that there's also a lineage of the whole banking history which goes down, has deep roots, just like you have both explored in your series. But the wars that the United States has been engaged in since 9/11, they targeted 7 countries and they listed them, and it's pretty well documented. All those countries are the ones that did not have central banks. So the United States has been sort of the strong arm behind this imperial grab for the consolidation of control over the monetary system for the entire world. And I think we're at this moment where it can go very chaotic, but we have to present the alternatives very loudly and very strongly. The biggest challenge that we have is the dominant myths and people's resistance to myths, because it means shattering their worldview. But the best thing that we have on our side is truth and the hidden history, which is emerging. And I think what you're doing is very valuable to help get out the truth, the history. And also, I think an important piece is just also to expose the media, who owns and controls the media and how it's been used against us, because a lot of people still don't realize how they've been lied to and how they've been tricked.
Right. Well,
so thanks for all your work.
Yeah, the United States and many of the countries are in thrall to the secret societal system that has been the moving force behind a lot of the perfidity.
Yes.
Robert, would you like to go next?
Yes, I would like to say a few words. First to Joyce, with regard to what's happening in the Middle East, and to use the words that Alana used, plunder. Plunder is what's going on in the Middle East. Plunder and oppression. And in order to stop that, we have to stop supporting a heresy that is called Christian Zionism. You cannot reconcile Christianity and Zionism. And another trope that I am speaking out against is the idea that Jesus was a communist. The cornerstone of communism is that there is no God. So don't even think about equating Jesus with communism. Secondly, not only do we have to stop giving credence to the heresy of Christian Zionism, we have to stop supporting Zionism and allowing it to buy our Congress and buy politicians. If you want to free our economy, you have to free it from the AIPAC and the control that Zionists have exercised on the economy, the politics, entertainment, and what I call the mockingbird talking monkey media, which is the CIA takeover of all except alternate media nowadays. Thank God for the internet. We have to give more support to alternate media. We have to rein in the Mockingbird talking monkey media and realize that the CIA is the New World Order. People don't realize the New World Order is the name of the New World Order. And it comes from a book that was written by H.G. Wells in 1938 called New World Order. After World War II, when the United Nations was formed, there was a party here in the United States and around the world called World Federalism. And there was a party called the New World Federalist Party. This party nominated a presidential candidate in 1948 to run against the Democrats and the Republicans, and he lost. That candidate's name was Cord Meyer. Cord Meyer ran for president in 1948 and lost. He was the man who would be president. And the CIA, knowing that he was a communist, because that's what World Federalism was promoting, hired him to become the director of the MK Ultra program. So once Cord Meyer inserted himself into the CIA, he took his retinue of acolytes with his political ideology to form a new world order. And the company that we call the CIA, it is a company, has been creating that ever since 1950. So we have to wake up to the fact that the enemy is within.
Yeah.
Right here at hand's reach, I always keep the book very close to me. Robert Kennedy warned us in 1961, the enemy within. This is what he was talking about. The mafia, the CIA, got married in 1959 with a common goal to assassinate Fidel Castro, and they've been married ever since. And they're responsible, along with a lot of Zionist money, for the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. So let's wake up to that. It's next. Excuse me, let me just get this out. President Trump has a policy that has had many very amazing things embedded in it, but because of all of the talking monkey media concentration on all the scandals, we're missing out on it. Two of the things that he spoke about was building 10 new cities and releasing federal lands. The United States government is hoarding land, and President Trump has a plan for releasing that land to people, and part of it is building 10 new cities. We have a guest here named Quanta. He reminded me of something that goes back a very long time, which is the mystery of Leo Quanta, who was appointed by President Reagan as an ambassador without portfolio to demolish the Soviet economy. And in doing so, he made a tremendous amount of money, which should have gone back to the American people. And it's been locked up. George H.W. Bush locked it up in 1996. We've got to find out where that money is. But the main thing is we have to stop giving blind allegiance to Zionist policy and Zionist direction of our national policy. Now, if I would like to just pause there, but my friend Jill Benzer would like to have a couple of words, and then we'll just go out.
Thank you. This is very short, but I just want to say thank you so much for the presentation and mention that what I've learned from these wonderful, wonderful discussions is that you found the proof or the basis for the imperialism in the in an occult practice, that what you brought out and in other talks. And I think that we cannot ignore that this is a part of what is going on the earth, that there is an allegiance among people and rulers of the earth, that it seems there can be maybe an allegiance with higher forces, negative spiritual forces, and that this is why we have trouble on earth whenever there is a movement towards justice and towards goodness for people, it tends to be done away with.
Okay,
So,
okay. I heard that. You know,
yeah.
our problems here on Earth are from the people here on Earth. Okay, and they aren't stopped because there's somebody up in the sky saying we can't do that. And you know, I enjoy what you have to say, Robert, but you know, there was some untruths in there. Okay, but yes, we do need this round table isn't, you know, in allegiance to Zionism or anything. We're trying to find, you know, trying to understand our history and then trying to move forward into a positive way. So I appreciate all those comments, but you know, uh, I'm not going to say that, well, we can't do something here on Earth because there's spiritual entities up there that are working with the leaders to stop us. Okay, because we, the people, do have the power. Okay, and I don't know. I just
That's true, but that's not what my friend was saying. He was saying that you have to understand this is a spiritual warfare, and it's a battle between good and evil is being promoted openly, and people are not speaking out against it.
it's quite visual. You can see that there's evil being promoted. It doesn't take, you know, it doesn't have to be a spiritual battle. Okay, I mean it's we're here on Earth. Okay, it's a battle between people on the Earth. Okay. You know, we want to lay it off onto some spiritual or UFO people. We ain't going to get nothing done. Okay. It's we, the people, have to, you know, these secret societies are men. Okay. They are doing it because they are, you know, I wouldn't call them so much evil, but they do evil actions. Okay. They do evil actions. But these, you know, the secret societal system, they're responsible for the killing of President Kennedy. It was a
Yes,
mass trauma hit against us. 9/11 was a mass trauma hit against us. Okay.
yes,
These are people. These are,
and they worship evil, and they are evil forces, and they have power. We're talking about religion here. What's the basis of religion? Belief in spiritual forces. We have the forces of good, we have the forces of evil. And Zionists are devoted to evil. If you have studied Zionism and if you studied Judaism, you'll understand that there are several heresies embedded in it, not the least of which is Sabbateanism, which reversed the Ten
yes,
Commandments.
yes. But again, those are people, okay, that are saying, okay, I'm going to, you know, instead of loving God and treating my fellow beings as my neighbors, they are doing the difference. I mean, and this is old. This has been happening for a long time. Why do you think the Jews came up with Jubilee and all these different things? Because again, these are men that are doing evil things. They aren't doing it because they're aligned with some spiritual evil. Okay,
Yes, they are. It's quite, they are acting on their beliefs. So
that's
I think we're both talking about the same
that's
thing.
belief. That
You
is
refuse to
it's a
believe
belief.
the spiritual element behind it.
Hello, this is
Okay.
actually a semantic argument, which is
Yeah.
very interesting, but I think that, and we can have a different opinion about, you know, those things and still continue our
Yes.
conversation.
Yes, but again, these are men that are doing this. These are people and ladies. Okay, the secret
Thank you.
societal system is
So, Chris, how do you stop those men?
you talk about them. You inform people about them.
That's
Okay,
what we're doing.
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. That's what we're doing. And like I say, you once you start, you know, going off into other directions, you lose the power of what we're actually doing, talking about men doing evil actions.
Not if those belief systems are empowering those men to do those things. Are you aware of the are
People,
you aware of the Einstein
okay,
Oppenheimer letter of 1947, where they concluded that the return of the UFOs are the return of the Elohim, and that they proposed to the Truman administration a secret treaty with these entities to prepare the advent of the return of the Elohim?
BS. I've tracked it down. It's just baloney. It's
To
just
you,
baloney, and it gets you off into the over this stuff. And
listen,
maybe
it's
the
baloney to you, but it's not baloney to Oppenheimer and Einstein and the people who signed on to that belief system. And that is the core of the national security state
no,
and all of the occultism that is embedded in the federal government now.
Yeah.
Okay.
because that was happening before then. Okay, it didn't just start in 1946, 47. Lord have mercy. You know,
Yes, I know about Henry Wallace too. Right, Henry Wallace and Buddhism and FDR, all of it. But you have to understand that beliefs create behavior, and just saying that it's evil men doing evil things is is too simplistic. You
why?
have to take you have to take
Is
a
it too
stand.
simplistic? Why is it
Yeah,
too simplistic? Because
because
if
you just think that it's men who are greedy and want to get richer. No, there is an evil. There is
system is
evil
about
behind this.
control. It's about
Well,
control.
yes, it is.
We have like one more person that was going to speak, and it's 4:45.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've gone over time because again, I don't want to see us set off into other things. Okay, because again, it's the secret societal system is run by men. Okay, and some women too. Okay, and they're people.
Well, looks like the other one's Amy's gone.
And,
So
Yeah, well, we went over, so.
We went way over.
Yeah.
any last words? Excuse me for getting, but again, it all that does is divide the focus and the power of the people. My things.
shall we have some closing thoughts here?
I think, well, we've certainly appreciate, I mean, I would have to say that what this shows is that part of our challenge is figuring out how we can create the dialogue that allows for our own differences not to push us off the course. And I think that is part of the difficulty. And I do feel that there is a level at which it's a language problem. That sometimes in the language we use, for instance, I like to say when it comes to the word alien, I said I don't actually really think anything in the entire universe can be truly alien, because alien to me is a human being who comes to your shore from another country when they don't have proper documentation. That's an alien to me, which means you're uninvited. You are not welcome. Well, does that really exist in the universe? I don't think so. So, I'd like another word to describe what that is anyway. So that's my comment about that. What do you have to say?
I just want to thank everybody for coming out today and, and for voicing their opinions about what's clearly, we're getting down to the it. Robert, thank you very much for your contribution. And I think that, we've got to figure out how we can make these things, bring these things down to earth, as Chris said. I think we've been dealing with phantoms for so long, especially as it regards the Kennedy Association and magic bullets. We've been dealing with the magic of John Dee in our circle, in our roundtables. And it's beginning to I'm beginning to realize that a lot of the things that they excluded John Dee as an example 400 years ago from scientific consideration because he didn't conform. He didn't narrow himself down to, to things that were provable based on the science of the 16th century and the 17th century. But the fact is that we have this quantum world we live in today that is, you've got to start considering all kinds of issues. And I think that we're dealing with a lot of that in our issues right now, in terms of what we thought once was magic is now not magic at all. It's just
Quantum physics.
It's just part of a bigger a system of that we're becoming aware of. The concept of coincidence, the strangeness of things. Well, the strangeness is only strange until you understand what it is, and that's what we're, with the help of Chris and the other supporters of our roundtable, are trying to get to. And so anyway, thank you all. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Chris, and Joyce, and where's
Carol?
Carol? Yeah, Carol. And
All the
and Alana, and thank you, because it's all helping to define things that for me have been kind of vague concepts, but are getting much more clear in my ideas.
Thank you.
Yes.
Troy.
And excuse me for being contentious here, but I thank you, Robert, for bringing these things up and talking about it. But the situation, I mean, New World Order, okay, I've been hearing that meme for so damn long, it's not funny, okay? And the New World Order was going to be brought to us by the UN, okay? They demonized the UN, people trying to get together and say, hey, we've got problems in the world. Okay, yeah, there's going to be nefarious people involved in that, but everything isn't nefarious. And so, they said, well, the New World Order is going to be coming through the UN and the left, okay? Well,
No,
so,
I said it's coming through the CIA.
through the CIA, however you want to say it, okay? But right now, okay, you've got Trump, and he wants to buy Greenland, okay? He wants to make Canada the first state, okay?
We bought Alaska. We bought the Louisiana Purchase. We bought Arizona. We bought California. There's nothing wrong with buying a piece of land.
Well, there are people there that would have to admit to it, and again, they're just bringing in the New World Order through a different door, okay, through Mr. Trump, okay.
Well, if you looked at the election that they had in Greenland, it was in the direction of becoming part of the United States.
That's not quite true, Robert. Again, you're pushing stuff that isn't true and I wonder why. Is there a political purpose? Why is it that you are trying to intersect these things into
I'm just reporting to you that there was an election in Greenland, and the party that was in support of distancing itself from Denmark won that. And there is a referendum in Alberta now because Alberta wants to withdraw from the tyranny of Toronto and the communist enclave that has taken over Canada and is oppressing every freedom that we cherish as Americans: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly.
And again, you're creating a dialectic, okay, where one side is good, one side is bad, and this is not correct, Robert. This is
I
not
disagree
correct.
with you. This
Well,
is a
that's fine.
dialectic.
We can disagree. Okay, we can disagree, and because there's a thing about sovereign countries and what was created here in the United States of America, and then the export of democracy that happened from this country. Okay, and I mean, there were people that were working against this country with the Constitution before the ink was dry on it. Okay, and we're
And afterwards.
dealing with
And,
those folks.
yeah, the
Okay.
Catholic Church was one of those afterwards.
Right,
That's
I can
another
get a
thing.
book that says the Catholic Church is to blame, the Masonics are to blame, all kinds of different people. Okay, again, that's a blame game. I don't really want to play that game. Okay, I want to go forward, okay, with the people in an honest way and have us understand the perfidy that we've gone through, okay, and not bring in more perfidy.
Good on you.
Okay. Onwards to a
Have
better.
a good day.
You bet. Take care.
Paul.